Welcome to the Drivers Republic podcast, brought to you in association with Dundee Motors, where more Irish drivers find their next car from a trusted dealership than anywhere else. Why? Because Dundeal's trusted dealer program means verified dealerships and the kind of backup that matters, like warranties and history checks, giving you confidence from the very first click.
Paddy, are we in your old office?
We are sitting in my first office in Volkswagen Group Ireland, yeah, with the beautiful views of Liffey Valley.
So when you handed in your resignation, did you send an email from that desk over there?
No, I wasn't sitting. I was moved around a few times actually I think I just became gradually less important, and I eventually was down at the lift.
They were trying to push you out.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it worked in the end.
This is where I started. And yeah, it's nice to be back here. And we will, of course, be talking to Martin Cardiff, who's head of sales for Volkswagen passenger cars, and we've commissioned his office.
Yes, that I should say that it's not because you're back in a new job. That's not the reason we're here. So yes, he'll be talking to us later on. And what would be very interesting with Martin is, and obviously yes, he's got a Volkswagen hat on, but he's worked in Skoda, started off his career working basically as a mechanic's hand, and he will give you an insight into, if you're wondering, why and how is the price of my new car, whether it's Volkswagen or otherwise, he'll kind of explain the process.
Yeah, because I think there is a perception that, cars are just expensive in Ireland because, they're trying to make loads of money, etc. In fact, it turns out probably cars in Ireland are, in fact, a little bit cheaper than they are in other markets because there's so much taxation. But also he sort of pulls back the curtain and shows us how many years are involved in the planning of a car and what exactly is required to get a car onto the Irish market. So an interesting chat and a lengthy discussion with him coming up later on.
So as we often start the podcast with the news. Any news, Paddy? Any news?
Well, if we one piece which I saw yesterday, which I thought was interesting, was Minister Dara O'Brien, Minister for Transport, who is discussing bringing in a scrappage scheme again for EVs this time, because they've acknowledged that EV sales haven't been quite what they had muted historically. We were supposed to have 1 million EVs in the road by 2030. It's going to be nothing like that. We're about 15% market share for EVs currently.
And I think everybody kind of accepts that now.
Yeah, it was a bit of a fictitious figure, but there was one they wanted some headlines on.
So this is if you are trading an ICE car in for an EV.
Yeah, they haven't. It was a piece in the Journal yesterday. They haven't given any major details on it, but but he's acknowledging that, okay, we probably will get to maybe 600,000 EVs by 2030, but has said, look, we do need to keep incentives coming, and maybe we do need to look at something like a scrappage scheme. And he says that he has his team currently looking at that right now. So that is an interesting one.
Welcome news. Started off the week at Alpine. They had a launch of their new A290 car in Mondello, but they also brought the A110 along too.
I did see your lanyard, which had you down as Nobby on Cars YouTube, and also the Drivers Republic podcast. They just forgot one of the other hosts for...
Well, you don't really go to openings of envelopes.
Yeah, no, but I would have. Do you know what? I would have taken a day off for that one. I would have taken given a sort of one of my fingers, I think, possibly to drive that one. Was it as good as we hoped it would be?
Yes. So there's a few different versions. I think there's 5 different trims in total. And there's the one I was driving was the 217 brake horsepower version. So
there's a GT at the start of the range.
180 brake horsepower.
Is that a sort of...
That's 36,690 including grants.
I'm really surprised by the price of that. And is that losing any of the jazzy spec, or is it...
Well, so on top of that you have a GT Performance, there's a GT Premium, and then there's a GTS, and then there's a Premier Edition. I think there's about 1,500 of them being built in the world.
Do they have one there?
No, they didn't. It was the GTS I drove. So the Premier Edition is €44,700. But if you genuinely want one of them, I wouldn't hang around.
Now, I was only recently in the Renault 5. You and I did a podcast sitting in the Renault 5 recently. I loved it. Great car, great handling. How does this compare? And also, is there a point in going that extra 10 grand plus?
I think that's the only reason you get one of these cars. I think to get and I haven't tried the 36.9 version, but I feel a nicely spec'd, iconic 5 will be close enough to that for every day. There's only an extra 30 brake horsepower, let's not forget. Now, it's not the same car, essentially.
Steering's heavier,
suspension's
a little
been
bit
changed.
firmer,
brake feel is great. It makes noises. The version I drove with the 217 brake horsepower torque steers and intentionally.
It looks very good as well.
Yeah.
It is, but again, you know, and I was talking to another journalist the other day about it, and I was saying, you know what, would you see the point of it? He just said, look, for me, there's enough crack in a Renault 5 and you know, it's a very considered decision to spend that €10,000 more, but you could also.
I think a good way to describe it is, and we're in the right building, it's like a Golf GTI and a Renault 5 versus a Golf R.
Yeah.
And some people just didn't feel the need to go for the R.
I would have been one of those people who I always thought there's enough fun in a Golf GTI to not necessarily need an R, but there you go.
And the older I get, I definitely believe that. And look, the R is a special car. The Alpine is a very special car. And, you know, it's going to be very, very affordable to run for what it is.
So with this car, where does one buy one?
So the only place you can buy it currently will be Windsor Motor Mall, which is where Joe Duffy BMW used to be, which is at Charlestown Shopping Centre.
And I had it in my head that this car would sort of start with at least a 4, if not a 5. So the pricing is a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
Are they expecting to shift a few of these?
They didn't really get into numbers for that. I know the Renault 5 seems to be selling quite well by our standards. They're definitely well into the multiple hundreds.
Are they already?
In terms of pre-orders and stuff, yeah. I don't know, to be honest with you, but I don't see it selling. Is it a 50 unit a year car in Ireland?
Yeah, tricky from one dealership, but
and if someone did comment, a whole 217 brake horsepower. You know, brake horsepower is just part of the story. It's weight, it's driving feel, it's steering, it's suspension. It's not just about that brake horsepower.
Did you drive the car on the circuit?
You couldn't drive the car. You could drive the A110 on the circuit, which I thought was strange.
Why was that?
I don't know. It was because of charging. I don't know. Now I think on a good day, it's going to be a 200 kilometre car.
I just think, why launch a car at a circuit?
I know.
And then not have you drive. Have one that's just doing that.
So I didn't even bother driving the A110. I've driven it before and I just didn't have time. I was like, look, I'm here to have a look at the A290.
The A110, you know, is that, again, if you want one, how does one get one?
So there's a facelift version of that coming. It's pretty much on the way. But if you want the outgoing version, which is not that different, they do have them and they will be slightly cheaper. I think the new version is going to be not far off 100 grand.
Yeah, I've never driven the car, but I believe it's joyous.
It is, yes.
How would you compare
rear engine, well, mid-engine.
911-ish comparison?
It's like an MX-5 met a 911.
Wow.
That's how
love
it's...
child. French love child.
That's like, a French mistress came along and the A110 was born. The daddy was a 911 and the lovely French lady was a beautiful MX-5.
I know you were off to see the Nissan Leaf, but you can't talk about that. But
can't.
Prior to that, you were over in Skoda.
I was in Skoda.
We were in Prague, and the Elroq RS.
Yeah.
VRS, if you want to know your Ray Lady, but the Elroq RS.
Lads!
We've talked about these RS EV versions before. I wasn't a massive fan of the Enyaq RS. I thought it just was a bit insipid and let the badge down a small bit. That's just my opinion. Elroq is a smaller, lighter.
It probably
EV.
works. It probably works because it is smaller and lighter compared to the Enyaq RS. I'd kind of be along the same lines as you on that. It's 335 brake horsepower. It's loads of torque. It's dual motored. Obviously, it's all-wheel drive. To be honest with you, I haven't put my video yet because that is also embargoed, and I can't talk about driving dynamics on that till next week's episode either. I can just say it's still a very quick Skoda.
Well, we can talk about the already existing Elroq because I drove that a couple of weeks ago and I found that handling-wise, that was really quite good for that type of vehicle.
I felt it's about 200 kilos lighter than an Enyaq, and I thought you could feel that.
Yeah. Any indication on pricing yet? Are you allowed to talk about that?
Pricing would be €54,000, which compared to a Sportline is only about 3.
And with the usual zany colours.
So you get the Mamba green.
All right.
There's a matte grey colour, which is very nice. You can't car wash it. You can't park it under trees. There's lots of terms and conditions with matte colours, but it does. I liked it. But in order to get the matte grey in Ireland, you have to get a Max Pack. And it it has like head-up display, I think, and fancier lights, whatever. But that car pushes it beyond 60 with that paint. You lose the grant.
No.
So essentially, and because you have the Max Pack as well, your matte grey turns into currently an €8,000 edition. So for now, Skoda Ireland will not be offering the Elroq RS in that matte grey.
You had a look at some of the heritage of RS as well.
Yeah. Not huge level. Again, didn't have huge levels of brake horsepower because it doesn't need it because it's light. Cracking noise of it around the track. They also had an ENIAC, it's an ENIAC rally car. Essentially, they're trying to do what they did with the Fabi RS with the ENIAC. So it's 300 kilos lighter. You couldn't drive that. It was a racing driver was driving it for you. He was on his third day, I think, of doing laps of the test track. So he was very comfortable with it, probably doing it while he was nodding off, and had a lovely, not a rally car noise of it, but had a very distinguished noise off it on the outside of the car.
And is this something that they think might be a thing, electric EV rallying?
I think it's just, well, probably will. Like, look at Formula E, it possibly will be someday, but I think it was just Skoda flexing, showing what they can do.
And am I right in thinking you may have taken a bit of an honour for the Irish market?
Yeah, so the people who run the track aren't Skoda people, but it is a Volkswagen approved test track. So they have things like rumble strips and uneven surfaces, and they have 65% gradients that we drove up in an Elroq. And myself and Neil Briscoe, who's not a small man, he's not vertically challenged. He's tall and broad. He won't mind me saying that.
Yeah.
He was in the back seat beside me, and this thing was taking off at a far higher pitch than you would, for example, be in a plane going on your holidays. So the two of us looking at each other as we're wondering, is this thing going to topple backwards? And it didn't. And EVs are meant to be brilliant at it because they've so much torque, so they're better. But they also use this area for paramedics, so they bring ambulance drivers in to show them if they're kind of sometimes, again, because they're like, okay, they're summing up a mountain. Can we go there? Will the vehicle cope? Will it be able to get back down? They use this test track to be able to show them, no, your vehicle, you can. The only one that they do struggle with apparently is the Mercedes Sprinter ambulance. The nose of it catches coming down the gradient because it's just so long. I think most cars' nose catch on that gradient. It's so steep. So that was fun. But they set up a little circuit, and there was a couple of cones involved, and then a parking maneuver, and you had to reverse into a space. And all these German journalists were all high-fiving each other. We're getting like 58 seconds, 59 seconds. And in IROC, a little bit tired. And on my second attempt, did it in 48 seconds.
Mark Noble, congratulations.
And apparently one of the actual drivers did it in 43. So I was like, that's all right.
Very respectable.
I did clip a cone on the way out, but
we won't talk about that.
I was done at this point. The time
that doesn't count. So when Elroq RS lands, are we getting it soon?
I'd imagine it'll be here very soon. Yeah. So the video will be out, I think, Wednesday. I have a lot of burgers in my head at the moment, but I might look. You can order an Elroq now.
So so obviously, this is coming out on a Friday night. If your video will be on Wednesday, so driving impressions you will be able to speak of later in the week, and I'll be on cars on YouTube.
Yeah, same for the Nissan Leaf. They won't be driving impressions. That was a static studio film, but I did get to talk to the vice president of design for Nissan, and his name is Giovanni. And he's from California, not Italy.
Okay.
You think with that name?
I was gesticulating just there.
I was wondering what that was. I thought you were saying hurry up. So he's head of design in Nissan. He's worked there for a long time. He's worked on GTRs. He's designed the Aria. Cool guy as usual. Very nice suit with runners. That's how car designers generally dress. But for some car designers are a bit up themselves, Paddy.
They can be fond of themselves, for sure.
This guy was just a bit cooler. He was happy to chat, talk about growing up in the 90s, which kind of inspired the design of the car. So, look, we'll talk about it more next week.
I was waxing lyrical last week about the Cooper Born VZ, which was a very lovely thing. This week I've done the perfect back-to-back, and then I've been driving the Volkswagen ID.3 GTX.
Right.
You've driven both as well. Something softer or a little bit less. Now, we've said GTX is not a GTI, but I found now over the course of the week that the Cooper just felt that little bit sharper. Everything is pretty much the same, except, and I still haven't figured this out, I got it wrong. The ID.3 GTX has a bigger torque figure.
Does it?
Yes. It has 565, I think.
Why?
Versus, and I don't know why. But I was trying to check it out, but we've actually asked, we could ask Martin Cardiff. But there's a larger torque figure. Everything else appears to be the same, but larger torque figure on the ID.3 GTX. Head-up display on the model I've driven, which wasn't on the VZ. It's also cheaper, even at the top spec, 38 and a bit versus 40
Yeah, and there is two
41.
different trims on the GTX. There's a GTX Performance and a
Yeah, the
GTX
Performance Plus.
Performance Plus. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
But
yeah.
no, I think as you say, Volkswagen can't show their hand as much as Cupra can because they know they have to make a GTI. Not of an ID.3.
But even like the thing about the VZ as well is that it's so subtle because they all look quite nice. The Cupra Borns, they all have generally fairly big wheels. The Born VZ, you know, at first glance in a car park, you wouldn't think that it's necessarily the venomous one, which it is. But yeah, strange. You know, it's strange to drive two cars which are so similar. But I would say I was possibly drawn a little bit more to the Cupra by the end of the week. Neither one would be absolutely fine. However, that price is just very difficult to, you know, it's a few €1,000 in the difference, so that it is hard to and I know that the ID.3 GTX is selling very well in the mix of ID.3, so suddenly it's because it's such good value that it's becoming one of the dominant specs.
We keep talking about it.
Yeah. So what have you been driving domestically at the moment?
Domestically, I currently have a Suzuki Vitara.
I've driven that car.
What did you think of it?
I thought it was sort of an able car. It felt a little bit dated in parts.
Yeah.
Interior wise, it felt a little bit dated. But a very capable SUV. Very much an antidote to the usual. Where there's a lot of cars, a lot of SUVs in particular now, especially EVs ones, which are just feeling very the same. So it was nice in a way to get into something that felt a little bit more analog.
Well, that is the word in many ways. Like, for example, whether you want to change your ADAS settings on most new cars these days, it'll be in the screen. But in the Vitara, it's on the little needle that is used for resetting the odometer. It's very old school in that sense. It has a manual gearbox. I found into fifth gear, the way the leg of the gearbox is designed is a little bit strange and quirky. You feel like you're going into third when actually it is fifth. Very, very loaded with standard specs. So even like all versions, for example, get blind spot. I think the starting price is like 31.5. You can go up to 35 for the full hybrid, which has less power than the mild hybrid.
Yeah, I saw that on the website and I wasn't really sure why that was the case, but
so it has a bit more battery power, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess it's more EV grunt, but I'm not sure how much of that is available at any given time. But
this very the interior space really isn't designed for today's mobile phones, for example. There's nowhere to drop your phone. The cup holders are just about big enough. The door bins are good.
Yeah, it's an anonymous enough thing as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you go into a crowded car park looking for it and you're like, where is it? But look, for some people it's going to tick an awful lot of boxes and you know that they're well built. They last really well.
Reliability, they only come behind the likes of Lexus in those huge UK surveys of reliability.
Yeah, because there's big Toyota links there historically as well. So yeah, I think so. So Honda Jazz for me next week. You've been in that.
Like that. My subtitle on YouTube was Honda Jazz, not just for grannies. Which is true.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit expensive though.
Like all Hondas. Now, there are two more versions of the Civic coming this year to make the Honda more affordable. It's about 48. There will be two lesser trims. The Jazz, I don't know if that will be the case because there's already kind of enough different models. It is a little bit expensive, but you know what? A new Yaris, which is now only available in hybrid, is €28,000. So I don't know if it's massively under competitive.
Cars are expensive.
Cars are expensive, and again, you're getting an awful lot of stuff, including the automatic gearbox. It has that little magic seat, very cool. So basically, you can push up the seat a bit almost like when you have to put your chair on top of your desk in school. You can do that with the rear bench in a Honda Jazz, and if you went to IKEA in such a small car, I'm not saying you could fit a bed in it now, but if you were buying like tall, bulky, but not really wide items.
Shelves or something.
Yeah, shelves or like a nice big huge plant. You'd fit it in the back of a Honda Jazz. So as always, the press car version was the highest spec and all that. A kind of CVT gearbox. Honda do weird things with their gearboxes. They're like.
Just see, well, I don't love a CVT gearbox ever.
Like in the Civic, for example, the engine never actually drives the wheels. A bit like e-Power from Nissan. So. Yeah, but look, they're again a very reliable car. As I drove by them there this morning, Honda, the power of dreams. It's a good slogan, I think.
Coming up after the break, we are going to talk to Martin Cardiff, who's head of sales of Volkswagen passenger cars, and he's going to be a fund of information on just what it takes to bring a car to the Irish market.
And just to give you a bit of context, yes, he works here now and he's kind of in that sort of, that sounds very business-like role, but he got his hands dirty at 14 years of age, so he's been in the car business a long time. Welcome to the Drivers Republic podcast, brought to you in association with Dundeel Motors, where more Irish dealers find their next car from a trusted dealership than anywhere else. Why? Because Dundeel's trusted dealership program means verified dealerships and the kind of backup that matters, like warranties and history checks, giving you confidence from your very first click. Welcome back to episode 3, everybody. Good morning, Paddy. Good afternoon, Paddy.
Good morning, Mark. And we are back in Liffey Valley again. And this week we're joined by Martin Cardiff, who's head of sales for Volkswagen passenger cars in Ireland. Martin, hello.
Hi, Paddy. Mark, thanks for having me.
So today we want to talk about something which I think a lot of people would have an interest in, and it's the process involved in bringing a car to the market in Ireland. So, you know, often we see a new car in the forecourt, there's a new car launched, and that's the very end of the process. But there's lots and lots of stages in advance of that. So we've asked Martin to come on and join us today because Martin, obviously as head of sales for Volkswagen brand, is in charge of all of the sales aspect, but he's also done several roles in your career relating to product as well. First of all, Martin, tell us a little bit about your own career so far, some history on where you've worked previously.
Yeah, so head of sales in this company since February. Joined, let's say, the Volkswagen Group back in 2005. I would have been intern for Skoda after sales. Working for William Lee, who's the head of sales in Seat Cupra now. Then I finished college in 2006 and got a call from Ray Leddy, who you both know,
friend of the show,
to apply for a job, and applied for a job. Worked then with Ray and Colin in Skoda, doing all things sales, planning, product, marketing, everything. There was only 3 of us. At the time, the brand was trying to get into the top 10, so it was a very different brand then. But you got to do everything. So. Spent.
Was that pre-Volkswagen?
Yeah, that was
Ireland?
MDL world. So we would have been in motor distributors. So there would have been all the brands that they had. So Mazda, Mercedes, Audi, Volkswagen would have been on the Nace Road, Long Mile Road. So got to see a lot, experience a lot. Like I owe a lot to Ray and Colin for showing me the ropes back then, because prior to that, I would have been, like, I started off in the car industry like when I was about 14, like after school.
What were you doing?
In the garage. I was working in an independent garage, and it's called O'Connor's Garage in Ballycanoe. So I would have been a mechanic's aide, let's say. I got a job there, started off washing teleporters that came off a building site. Fantastic. But did that, I think, for 3 days, and then Jim and Morgan O'Connor, who run the garage, they just kind of took me under their wing, and at the weekends and the midterm breaks and all, I would have been shown the ropes. So I would have gone in from washing teleporters, washing cars, to changing tyres, to changing punctures, changing brake pads by the end of it, servicing cars. Finished school, went off to college, DIT Bolton Street, did automotive management technology, and then through that got into MDL on an internship, and that's how I landed in here. 20 years since my internship this year. Wow. I'm 19 years with the company, with the Volkswagen Group, let's say. It would have been MDL previously, but then Skoda for 9 years. What did I do in Skoda? I did sales, product and planning, and I would have seen product and planning from the private importer side to the national sales company side. Then went on the road, area sales, where travels every corner of Ireland. Then had a stint in the factory, which was an eye-opening kind of stint.
I remember when you went to that. What did you do in the factory?
So spent 9 months there. I, for the first 3 months, was in central planning. So was in an office with, I think there was 12 people in the office I sat in, and there would have been 12 in 2 other offices. I was in midterm planning, let's say, for the first 3 months, where you're just sales volume planning all day long. You're learning new techniques, seeing what markets are doing. That was in 2012. So Ireland was in the middle of recession. So you're seeing things going on in other markets.
So you were living in Prague at this stage?
I was living in Prague, like commuting to Malada, Boleslav.
About an hour's drive,
Yeah,
depending on traffic.
an hour's drive, which, like, there's so much traffic coming out from Prague to Malada. I was doing it every day, and yeah, it was just a great experience in central planning. I moved over to international sales, so in the sales region, it's kind of deputised country managers responsible for Germany, Spain, and Southern Europe in terms of the smaller islands. So they kind of, there was Jürgen and Manuel, who were the country managers. They kind of took me under their wing. I would have been 26, 27 at the time, and they just kind of let me run with the smaller markets to kind of see what we could do there.
And how was it seeing things from the factory's perspective? Obviously, having just seen it from one perspective, changing, seeing it from the other side. What did you learn from that?
Yeah, like at the time, like I was on the you might remember the Rapid Launch Committee. And I remember always having a keen eye for Ireland, trying to get the market introduction plan right on that, but having all these other European countries. So you're literally trying to take 5 cars from Italy and 5 cars from Spain, 3 cars from Germany to make, okay, let's try and get the cars in for October for Ireland, and then getting it in the neck from all the other regions saying like, what are you doing? You're looking after Ireland.
So you were robbing Peter to pay the Paddy.
You trying to, yeah, exactly. But you so you got to see that, and like at the time, the Spanish market went upside down, and like we had gone, the Irish car market had crashed in 2009. Spain was like 2011, 2012, I think, and they went from 900,000 cars a year to I think 400,000 cars a year. So certain things that I would have picked up from being in the office and being in meetings and doing analysis, I was able to translate or use across in Sales Europe, and other things I would have picked up on that, oh well, why don't we try this? They've done this. So in terms of like some of the learnings from the bigger markets that you'd never get to see, because there could be the top 8 markets or top 5 markets, they get a bit more deeper exposure and stuff. So you got to see all that. At the time there was a superb, I think it was a facelift plan again. Would have been looking at that where they were literally trying to make sure that the project made sense from a business point of view, and is like some of those Simply Clever editions. So sitting in a 2-day workshop where there was I think 40 or 50 people divided into groups, deciding, someone deciding should there be an umbrella in the car or should it not, because it might save it 15, 20 euro. So there's all that sort of stuff.
I have a question about this. Just keep trying to remember to say it. So I often mention this in videos because in the new Elroq, for example, and I know that's not your problem anymore essentially, but there used to be a rubber handle in the boot lid, and I noticed in the Elroq it's gone, and they've moved it to the top of the hinge basically,
yeah,
which kind of defeats the purpose because you need to be now taller to reach it. So there is is that an argument with accountants, or are you directly dealing with accountants in that role? Or
yeah, some of it can be down to costs.
Yeah.
Some of it could be changing consumer behaviour. Albeit that people aren't getting taller, they're just to be essentially to come out and say this is the way it is going to be, and it could be they could chop something out or put something in because of it.
Right.
It just depends on the project itself. There's a lot of variables, a lot of movement components that I saw over there where it was like, okay, they couldn't do this alloy wheel because they're only going to do 6,000 units of that alloy wheel in that year, so therefore they had to scrap it or increase the installation rate to make it work. So there's that sort of stuff that you forget to think about really when you're in the market, because thankfully we don't have to deal with that level of detail. But yeah, it was eye opener over there in terms of that sort of stuff.
And no doubt having that inside knowledge from the other side helps you in your career here in Leaf Valley then, because you have a better insight into how it's actually going to work in the factory.
Yeah, so I would have came back to the role of area sales, and then shortly after I moved over to Volkswagen in 2015 to planning manager position, and I would have used almost everything that I did in the factory in terms of putting our argumentation forward, our analysis forward, just because you're used to seeing the argumentation and the slides and everything from the markets about why they need X, Y, and Z. And you're then going, what do we need for this person to agree to that? Like for instance, what do you need for this market to agree to swapping 400 units to pull the production forward from to shift production around to make sure that we have enough cars in September on the model that's running well in case we run out. So there's all those kind of bits and pieces, but also when you're putting together product measures, it's kind of, you have your wish list, and then you kind of get a feeling as to, okay, what might the factory earn off this equipment that you can say, just get us this and fight for a higher discount, and you put together the business case. So you get to see little bits like that and use them every day. But it gave me great footing, along with the learnings that I had in the role. When I was in Skoda, Paddy was a factory foreign service employee who would have set up a Volkswagen or Skoda product and planning at the time. So I would have learned from there. So that helps me in the role of planning manager, and then to progress into the role of head of product and planning.
I'm interested, would you have advice for someone who's in this career, or indeed any career, about going on a foreign assignment? Because it seems that you got an awful lot of benefit from it. So seeing, whether you work for Volkswagen or Siemens or whoever it is there a real benefit in going and seeing their side of things as well?
Yeah, without a doubt. There's Ireland is unique in itself. But even going over we would regularly fly over to the UK to see how things are done over there, and you see they do a bigger market, 10 times our size. You can get learnings from 2 days, but you can get more learnings from 3 years. I would highly recommend it. Whatever you do, you get the experience abroad if you can, if the company you work for offers it, and come back and use it and apply it on a day-to-day basis. Because some of it is you can use in terms of the style in which you do things. That's like in terms of the approach you can take it. The other side is you can also use it as an argument you get more credibility with the factory. I've been in your shoes. I've seen what that means. How about we just skip the chase and call it where we want it. So
the hours in Skoda HQ are particularly long. Is that true?
Yeah. So you're.
What's your typical workday there, and what's expected of you?
I did long hours over there. Yeah. More so in Sales Europe. Because you just had major deadlines. I would have been over there by myself, so I wouldn't have had an issue doing a 10-hour day. I was doing probably 10-hour days plus the commuting, then going home, and you'd wake up early in the morning and think of something before breakfast. So you were kind of living the situation. You're over there essentially giving it your all. So yeah, there would have been days where it would have been 10 hours. It could have gone into 12. You kind of just immerse yourself into it.
Sounds like you go to Skoda boarding school and then you come back with the knowledge.
Yeah, no, but it was great. The people over there were fantastic. Culturally, albeit that they're Central Europe. There's a history of from the West and from the East. Struggled in the first 2 months in terms of adopting to the culture, because I was working in an office where there was 3 people speaking English. So I was trying to talk and communicate on a day-to-day, going how do I access this? How do I access that? But then when you go into Sales Europe from the central planning side, everyone spoke English, everyone spoke German. So it was very different. But yeah, it was great.
I learned on a recent Skoda trip, if you want to say cheers to a Czech person, it sounds like you're saying nice driveway. So just say nice driveway really fast, and that's how you say cheers.
Right, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So look, the reason we asked you on today is really just to learn as much as you can share with us about the process of bringing a car to the market, because you've done all the roles. You've done product, you've done planning, you're now head of sales. So I suppose set the scene for us, if you like. If we take any car, for example, say the Tayron, which is out now, for example, or the current model Tiguan, how far back are you seeing it? I remember from working here those days where you would go and have your mobile phone taken off, you'd be brought into a room and shown around, years ahead of the product. So talk us through the very conceptual stage of, right, you get a phone call. Can it be years in advance, or is it months, or what is the general stage?
So you'd see, well, you wouldn't see the car. You'd know there was a certain type of car coming. It would have a project name.
So that's not, they don't call it the name.
It could be A14793, something random.
Doesn't
like that.
It doesn't make sense.
From that, you'll understand. Okay, that's an A hatchback, or that's something that's coming in. So you'd learn. Okay, that's 2026. That's a volume they expect. There's a price guideline. So you see that early out, 5 years out, let's say. Then within 3 years, things start getting more serious on the car. About 2.5 years in, you'll see a clay model of the car, usually if it's a new, completely new model, or you'll see facelifts. But that's kind of shrinking. That timeline's shrinking now, where it's realistically 2 years. You get to see nearly the finished article. You get to go over to where you hand in your phone and you have the security guards watching you, and you walk around. You get a full product presentation on it, but you would have plans in the previous year based on all the documents that were provided, what the sense of volume was for that model. So after you see the car, you get to feel okay, yeah, and that then allows you to go into an integrated planning round, which is a 3-year planning round where you dig into the detail by the pricing of the car, where it needs to be positioned, where the OEM or the factory would like to have it positioned, and where you would like to position it as a market based on history and based on how the brand operates. So that piece that's a lengthy process. I remember, I think it was 2016, 2017, with one of the facelift Passats, we had 16 iterations of a pricing round, because we were deciding at that time every piece of equipment and trying to get it to make sense for us from a price positioning point of view, and for the factory. So you see the car. So 5 years out, you usually find out there's a model coming. 3 to 2.5 years out, you see the car, but you will have got a flavour as to what the potential of that car is, and then that's honed in, and every year then you would revise that planning based on, has the market instruction changed, has it moved forward, has it moved back, has the market changed because of that, or is there something that the market is doing differently in terms of has consumer behaviour changed? Is there a move towards PHEVs as an example? Is there a move away? So you then have to change your mix planning, which can influence your pricing, and it can influence what you offer. So it's quite a rigorous process, but it takes about 2.5 years, I'd say, realistically.
When you're talking about negotiating with factories on prices, because this comes up a lot when I'm asked about multiple brands, how down to the wire can it go in terms of, particularly for the Irish market, which is a little bit trickier with VRT and everything else? Can you be negotiating, like, a car is going officially on sale next week? Could you be still today on a Friday trying to? Yeah,
like big influencer is like confirmation of the CO2 value. So once it's been homologated, that happens at the last hour. As in, like, you'll have a preliminary information based on what they estimate the CO2 to be before test, as an example. So then when the car gets homologated, you get the final CO2 values, as an example. That could mean the car jumps up a band in VRT, and suddenly, like, the volume of the car like might completely go from, say, like 800 units to 400 units a year because 3% VRT has been added. So that can happen at the very last hour. That has delayed market instructions. That's delayed pricing announcements. We've had cars on the way where they've been, like, invoiced, and you're trying to say, well, actually, this doesn't work now because the CO2s are different when we add on VRT. So it can happen in an ideal world. You have it at least 3 months out. You will have had a few pricing approval stages. So it would have gone to a pricing committee, been signed off, say 8 months out. There might have been a change where they might have said, okay, we have to remove this equipment, or we have to add this equipment.
So that could be. So could you then say, okay, can we get an 18-inch wheel option to bring down?
Yeah.
So it's that fine tuning all the time.
Yeah, that happened. Even right now, there's a model year change where there may be an alloy wheel change that is more aerodynamically efficient, basically to avoid a car going up a tax brand, to keep it competitive on pricing. So that goes on every year, but also on every.
And is that at a huge workload compared to 10 years ago? It might have just been, look, that's the price. We'll look at it again in 6 months' time.
There is, like, compared to like, if I look at it compared to, let's say, 10 years ago, we would have been able to decide every piece of equipment in a car. There's a lot of in terms of complexity reduction, because the reality is cars have to get to market faster now. Consumer demands are changing that. So right now, what the factory are doing now, or the OEM are doing now, is, like, they have a strong EU basis spec, which 90% of the time that could be your life trim line, because it's got such well equipment. They've decided, okay, every car has this across Europe, and then they offer packages, which usually there could be 3 or 4 pieces of equipment in that package, and they could offer that for, let's say, 70% of its price, in order to entice you to put it into the standard equipment, to give it a better list price, but also a better adjusted equipment value. And yeah, that process has meant it's more streamlined, but it is labour intensive.
And has it hurt trims like Orline, which have the bigger wheels?
Yeah,
the heavier cars.
The CO2 factor, yes. That can in some cases, like for example, Touareg or the car was brought in with the most efficient alloy wheel. Let's say it was achieving, I think, 5% VRT, and then but the alloy wheel that was selling in the end was the 7% VRT alloy wheel, so it drove it up because customers at that price point were like, okay, I want that wheel.
Okay, yeah.
So that kind of stuff goes on every day, and well, not every day, but every model year, every product, and that's why there's 3 product managers doing it for our range. But it has got there has been a high level of complexity reduction. The process is more streamlined than there was, say, 10 years ago. So right now you'll see specs that will be very, very similar across Europe. Say recently, we have the Edition 75s in Ireland. They're known as the Match in the UK, Match models. They're known as probably something else in other models based on localization. 95% of that equipment will be the same. And that allows for the cars to be produced faster. That allows for equipment sourcing to be easier. It allows to remove, let's say, some of the very, very bespoke orders to essentially streamline people, to allow things to be much more efficient because again, there's lots of demands on efficiency.
And it does dispel the myth for years that, the Paddy spec cars, that's just not a thing anymore, really.
No, there would have been the case, but it's now kind of, it's more centralized, let's say.
I was going to ask about that because 20 years ago, or even back in your MDL days, there was a very different spec of car just to get the car out at a price that would be anyway palatable for an Irish audience. You would have Audi A4s with hubcaps and windy windows, and I remember them as press vehicles. But now, surely now with EVs and with PHEVs, the field is much more level across Europe, I guess, because you're not being hugely constrained by, if we put this on and this on and this on, the price is so much more.
Yeah, like, let's kind of give you an example. When ID.3 was launched, we had the ID.3 first editions, which were all the same spec across Europe. Then we went into fast lane models, which were, there was about 13 different variants, but they were, I think it was Life DX, Business, Family, Style, Tech, Max. The whole idea, though, they were the same specs all over Europe. The whole idea was fast lane, get the cars built faster. So that has kind of carried through over the years, whereas like say 10, 15 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. You would have had, like, for instance, I would have had many arguments in 2019, 2020. A strong debate with the factory was, I think DAB became an EU standard.
2019,
so, 2019. And I remember sending them over data and going, this is how many DAB radio stations there are.
Yeah.
They're like, because they were like, this has a value. This is, the value of say it's €400.
And at that time, RTE had shut off DAB in this country.
So we're trying to say this has no customer perceived value because we don't need it.
Now it is back now, thankfully. But.
Yeah, and at the time we would have, we were looking at it from a consumer point of view, going, there's just no market demand for it. But we had our colleagues at the OEM saying, there's a benefit here. We have to charge for it. So that would have been, we would have been debating that at length. Alarms historically, like simple things like every car in the UK has an alarm. Every car in Ireland wouldn't have had an alarm. So when they tried to put us into a right-hand drive cluster and take the UK spec to 95%, we're like, but we don't need an alarm. Take it out. Bring down the retail price by €400. That's what would have been the debate. And they'd be like, but why? All the cars in the UK have it. And it's like, and when you're talking to Central Europe, they're looking at like Ireland, UK, you're side by side. How are you so different?
Yeah.
So it's and that's the joy of it.
Would things like that be a factor in? For example, you can't now get a Passat in Ireland anymore, but it is available in the UK. Is that you have to have a certain amount of numbers to order? Is it because of emissions? What was the reason?
Yeah, so the business, like, so we looked at Passat. It was when we were going through the rounds in terms of the offering that was put to us. To give you an idea, in the UK, the diesel Passat is only available in the R-Line, whereas in Ireland it would have been, like, historically the diesel Passat would have been 95% of the volume. So when you only have it available in one trim line, it reduces the volume potential. The pricing of the car, I think, simulated at an R-Line would have been around 60k. We have an ID7 at 57.5.
Why would you buy Passat? Yeah.
And with like the future is electric vehicles, depending on the road, the length, time that goes. But the ID.7 that we have is a very strong proposition against a Passat.
Particularly in the estate version. I love that car.
Yeah, it's great. It really is.
And to give you an idea of volumes, I think estates so far year to date in that size, it's probably about 250 units, half of which are the Skoda Superb. And then 1/3 of that is us in the ID.7 variant. Or the ID.7 Tour, and then the balance is a few competitors. So, like, what we could bring it in and do 50 cars, it just doesn't make sense. It has to make sense from a volume case, and the work that goes into that in terms of production capacity, everything from even locally in terms of the setup of the cars. You don't want to just be bringing something in to sell 50 units of it. You want to be doing 200-300 units plus. But yeah, it was sore to see it go, to be honest.
Because it was a bit of an Irish staple car, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was like what reduced Passat Saloon was the UK reducing its volume. And that essentially, it was the Saloon version of the Passat was sold mainly UK, Ireland and Turkey. Everything else, every other country, it was probably the flip of what we see in the States. So every time we would have a discussion with the factory, they'd nearly be laughing at us going, why do you buy saloons? I'd be like, why do you guys buy estates? And the reality is we get on a plane, they drive for 4 or 5 hours to different countries, and that's they pack up their cars. So when the Jetta end of production was announced, it was sore. When the Passat one was announced, it was sore. But thankfully we have the ID.7 there. We see in the fleet segment, while there is a volume potential, say for that size car, a lot of customers have gone into ID.4 and are somewhat, depending on where it sits on list prices, say with companies and all, in terms of their categories for their drivers, we see ID.7 volume in there as well. Albeit that it's not compared to what Passat would have been years ago, but we haven't seen a big pushback from it. And
ID.4 has been a particularly successful fleet car this year. And would ID.7 also get a boost if there was, I mean, I know there's BIK, but is there anything else the government, if they were listening, could do to help? From a BIK perspective, the biggest challenge from what we see is, when a leasing company signs up a contract with an end user, it's a 4-year contract. Right now they know for 1 year what the BIK rules are. So you could have, and as it stands, you could have the ID.4 could be, the BIK for a driver could be €50 a month, or I don't know the exact details depending on the mileage, let's say, but it could be, you could go from paying €50 a month to €500 a month by year 4 because there's uncertainty about the future. So all leasing partners are and retailers that sell leasing products to fleet companies are trying to manage that. But what gives certainty is to say, okay, when you sign X number of contracts this year, this is the price for that customer for the next 4 years. That would drive volume because no one likes uncertainty. No, and that's a huge change in your monthly bills. Yeah, and we saw January last year what happened when there was a sudden change. People's bills went up by €300, and next thing you know, there's a change to the BIK changes in terms of this €10,000 buffer that was put in to ease that. But it's a bit short-sighted, unfortunately. Yeah. Whereas when you're looking at contracts, you want to think like 4 years for the fleet and leasing market. When you buy a car as a private customer, you know what your monthly repayments are going to be for 3-4 years, depending on your product. And do you get much engagement, or obviously being Volkswagen Group Ireland, 1 in 4, I think it is, new cars registered in Ireland come from here. Do you get much engagement from the government in sort of saying, okay, will this work? Or does it just, here it is, deal with it? Yeah, in like you'll remember from your days here, in years gone by, like I would have been part of the lobby group that would have been trying to inform about the potential consequences of the VRT changes. Yeah. When Minister Eamon Ryan announced various different things in the tax strategy group paper, you're trying to educate them a lot of time, and there's a lot of work that goes on in the background by SIMI, by retailers with their local politicians, where they're trying to put the message across, because there's our message, there's probably another message coming from someone else saying the opposite. So you're trying to say, well, this is the reality. So do we get engagement? Yes, when we engage, we do. To be honest, I've been out of that circle for the last 3-4 years. But we were in your day here, Paddy. As you know, we were very active, and we got a good level of engagement. Submitted things to tax strategy group papers, as did SIMI. And usually SIMI will spend a lot of time making the noise and communicating on behalf of the industry to do a good job in that regard. So, and we've seen this week
Mark Minister Dara O'Brien, and hinting at potentially a scrappage scheme coming up to encourage more EVs. They've admitted that they're way off their million target, but are hoping for sort of 600,000 by 2030.
Which would still be a great result. Like, we are a small country. We sell, give or take, 120, 130,000 new cars a year. So even that figure was always too ambitious.
Always pie in the sky.
And 4 or 5 years ago, we would have flagged this to say it's pie in the sky based on changing VRT, the new car numbers. You can see we're doing an average of 120,000 new cars a year. There's a car park of 2.5 million cars. You need to be doing 160, 170 new cars. Saying, oh yeah, we'll get some imports from the UK or for Japan if they're older cars, it's not the answer. You want to be supplying your essentially locally created new cars. When we were flagging at the time, there's going to be BEV demand on used in the UK as well as Ireland. So don't just assume that these cars will swim across. And we can see it's happening now. So it's one of the boundaries, let's say.
And they have made it quite easy to import an electric car to this country.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, what we're seeing is there's good, like the used cars have definitely found their price. In terms of like it took like the last 2 years, it took a lot of pain to get there, let's say. And there's quite good demand on used cars. I think battery certification and a surety on the batteries. We rolled out a certified battery program across our network. So when you go and you shop for a BEV, you can see, is that car at 96, 97%? And the more data that there is on that, the more confidence it will bring, because there's a lot of scaremongering out there, but the facts are very different. So yeah, the used car market is turning a good corner on BEVs in that regard.
Talk us through then, at a sort of reasonably granular level locally, when or you've seen the car, you've agreed roughly the pricing, and you're at the sort of latter stages of it. When you're speccing a car specifically for Ireland, what are the factors that you take into consideration? Is it, do you have a persona of who this customer is? Do you have an idea of what it is they want? How do you sort of...
Can you get it in grey?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How do you create that sort of sweet spot for any vehicle?
Look, there's usually a playbook given by the factory about this customer is X years of age, they have 3 kids or 1.5 kids, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
We look at it in reality as like, what is the market doing right now?
They always do sort of skiing and cross country skiing.
Avatars. They have a dog.
3 dogs. Yeah. They never just sort of sit in the couch.
The same in radio, by the way. You get like Sharon, who's 35 and listens to Q102, and she goes to Aldi, and
yeah. So the question is, how do we determine where the car should sit?
Yeah, in terms of like specification, should it have a sunroof? Should it have cruise control? Should it have...
See, I don't see the point with sunroofs these days, because very few of them open.
But some people like them, and
they take out the head height, and they add weight, and they add money, and
and when when we went from NEDC to WLTP and CO2 based, the discussion was heavily on, do we take out sunroofs and make them optional extras? Because the difference could have been a sunroof that the CO2 tax could have cost 1,400, suddenly became €3,600. The reality is, if there's the demand on the used side for that car with a sunroof, that usually drives the behaviour.
Yeah.
I think, like from our perspective, or learnings over the years, is that a car, once a retailer has confidence in the car, it'll sell, because ultimately they're trying to manage the customer to make sure that the customer has confidence buying the car off them. They have the relationship with the customer. And usually that relationship it's not just you're buying the car and I'll see you in 3 years. It's you're buying the car, your family has bought the car, there could be 10 people connected to it. So we're always factoring that into it, going like, okay, where's this car going to sit in 3 years' time? I remember way back when, before Bluetooth was being brought in as standard, it was like, there was infrared, there's all this, and we were at the time going, well, what is this? Because at the time it was the mounted piece on the dash and stuff like that. But
your Nokia 6310.
Nokia, yeah, exactly. That kind of conversation was so retailer engagement is quite good on it, and sometimes having them, say, over in Dusseldorf and showing them the new models coming out, you can kind of, through conversations, you can kind of understand where do they see the journey going. We would, when we spec up a car, we usually, it's based on what we're selling today. So say if it's like probably Tiguan, we'd look at, okay, what's the demand in Tiguan? What are the high installation rate optional equipments? Do we keep them optional, or do we try and make them standard? Because like in some cases, if there's something that's at 80% an optional extra, you'll try and, in the new generation, you'll try and put it in as standard.
Yeah, and that is something Ray Leddy said to us when we interviewed him. Ray, for anyone who doesn't know, he's the head of product and marketing for Skoda Ireland. He broke down almost a car now compared to 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, you didn't get LED headlights, you didn't get an automatic gearbox. You're not comparing like with like anymore. But on the same vein, like Volkswagen Ireland were one of the brands that had to shave some prices off cars to remain competitive. Obviously, the technology was changing. Maybe supply was making it more affordable. When someone drops 10 grand off a car, people maybe think that's 10 grand profit that they were taking off you, but now they found it down the back of the couch. It doesn't work like that. But where does that 10 grand come from?
That's a good question. So if we look at BEVs in particular, so what happened in 2023 from an Irish perspective, we saw a slowdown March, April 23. So our order intake just halved. Then that was compounded by the SAI grant reduction from 5,000 to 3,500. But at the same time, something was happening in Europe. Production capacity was easing and easing drastically. So we went from a period of 2 years where customers were waiting an average of 8 months to get a car, extending into a year, to suddenly having to be okay, we can get that car to 6 to 8 weeks. They're usually the alarm bells. We will put a case back to the factory saying like there's our coverage is opening up here in terms of we need to have a better order intake plan, a better offer.
The landscape has changed, whatever.
Sorry?
The landscape has changed.
The landscape.
Kia are doing an offer that... Do you look at that specifically, other competitors, or...?
Yeah, we constantly watch the market. Yeah. But in terms of what happened with the BEV situation, demand dropped across Europe, and the OEM had to take drastic action. Where did that money come from? It came from all stakeholders involved in the sale. So everyone had to take pain in that. And thankfully now they're at a level, there's good demand on them.
But it's like anything else, though. As the technology develops and grows, the prices come down. It's like when DVD players came out first, they were £1,000, and then they're eventually at £20.
Yeah, and there's simple things like the cars are shipped to Ireland on a ferry, the price of the ferry might have, the shipping could have gone down, so that could save. So there's but on the other side of that, in 2022, that was an all-time high. So it has to it has to make sense for the OEM to do it. I think from there, without knowing the details as to their decision, but just basing it off my time here, I probably would have thought the decision probably was: do we just shut down production, or do we send the guys home that are meant to be building cars, or do we take something drastic and take a big haircut to do this? I imagine that's just or phase it down.
The CFO from Stellantis told me similar. They had yards and yards full of Fiat 500s in Germany because the German government shut off the grants. Yeah, just gone. Yeah. And Stellantis, as far as I know, had to take €10,000 off each car, and then the sales shot up again. Yeah. Which is always a sign. I was only talking about this to someone else the other day. The Nissan Leaf was a car that started about 29. Now I think the outgoing version's like 21,000, and again they're gone. So everything is a price, but it's everyone's also in business to try and make a profit as well.
And that's exactly it. It's like there's the European Green Deal in terms of we know the 2035 plan. We know where the journey is going there. We can see. Where ICE, you can see it in the figures. You spoke about them last week, where diesel's going, BEV is going, where BEV is going. There is, I think, everyone has their own journey. Every consumer has their own journey to get to where they're going. And what it felt like definitely under the previous government would have been that it was you needed to be driving a BEV or getting a bus. And I think that came true, and that changed the behaviour. But yeah, cutting off the grants, one of the arguments we would have put forward is if you want $1 million, keep the grants going, listen to us until you get to 500,000, 400,000, and then change it. They cut it off too quickly. They removed the SAA grant from PHEVs. I think that was in 2021. They removed the leasing, cars sold to the leasing sector.
Charger grants.
Yeah, so like from my perspective, if there's people that are in doubt, you can get a private lease product where essentially you're leasing the car. So there's people are ultimately, they're putting in their deposit, and if they're concerned about the car coming back in 3 years' time about the value of the car, they can get a leasing product. But the challenge is the government doesn't support that for a private consumer. So that's So that doesn't help things. So that's where the retailer comes in, and the retailer, that's why they're always caring about they're caring about the sale now, but also about that car in 3 or 4 years' time. What will that car be worth? Yes, there's guaranteed future values underwritten by FS or Volkswagen Financial Services in our case. However, ultimately the retailer is the one that is buying the car back off the customer in 3 years' time and reselling it. So they're worried about that. That life cycle of that car more so than the government, let's say.
In terms of specifically Irish characteristics, are there peculiarities, specifics to the Irish customer still, or have things leveled out across Europe really?
I think one of the things that we're quite regularly told is our colours are very conservative.
True.
In terms of you'll see the T-Cross, for instance, now has a nice array of colours, and we'll hear about installation rates from other markets then going, sure, like black, silver, grey. That's so that I don't think is going to change. I imagine it's linked to the weather. I don't know. It's something that it's
it's second-hand values, is it? They feel worried that they worry that if I get a yellow one, then I won't get as good a trade in 3 years' time or whatever.
There's that, yeah. So a lot of things have leveled out. Well, look, our behaviour is, I think, we're probably not too far apart from EU, let's say, now than we were years ago. And I think some of that would have been like the dawn of technology. We're all connected somehow now, so everything feeds across.
This is the Drivers Republic podcast, which is brought to you by Dundee Motors, home of the Trusted Dealer program, helping you buy with confidence from verified dealerships. We'll have more from Martin after the break. So Martin, as someone who clearly likes cars because you got into it at such a young age, when you, in your job, you get to see, just as an example, you get to see the Golf GTI or some sort of photograph of what it might look like 2-3 years ahead in advance.
Yeah. And
you just have to keep that yourself.
Yeah. And then by the time it comes, you're on to the next thing. So sometimes when I was doing the role of head of product and planning, I would have seen the change in the infotainment system, like the what we have on the BEVs now.
Yeah.
There's games coming. You can play games on this. And at the time I was like, this is mental. Like literally going, this is crazy. And they would have demoed it to us and showing us how it's working. It just blew me away at the time.
So are cars in 3 years' time, as in cars that haven't even been announced yet, are they going to be radically different?
I think...
they're still going to have steering wheels. They're still going to have 4 or 5 seats. But
I think what we need to... Look, if we look at it from the outside in, let's say, we now have AI. AI is playing a big factor in terms of our you can see how we're using it in business here. It's integrated into some of our cars. You can ask it what restaurants is there in Cashel or something like that. So that'll be more integrated. I think also the journey eventually will go towards autonomous cars. That will be a factor. I don't think it'll take over, but I think there will be more autonomous cars in the future. So
you could be essentially checking your emails, stuff that you couldn't do in the office, but you're on the way home. So
exactly.
And in theory then, for example, I mean, and as someone who does like cars, the idea of autonomous cars is like, oh God, really? But if, like your time in Skoda, you're going home to do some more work, if you could, on your way home, get the last few bits done and then have more time with your family or whatever, that's a good thing.
Exactly that. Your car, say for someone like me, that's a commuter, your car becomes a mobile office. Your journey that you're taking is very, you could be, I imagine, sitting there at a table eating your breakfast. So there's that, I think that, but how far away is that? Originally, I think it was talked about in 2030. I think everything's kind of slowed down a little bit now in terms of it's a little bit beyond that. But that's probably the biggest change that I see that's coming. Now, how affordable will that be is the big question, because that technology comes at a cost, and also the regulation behind it. EU regulation as we know, is quite heavy on it. The cars have been tested all over the world and in certain cities in Europe, and we can see what's happening there. But that's probably, for me, that's probably one of the most exciting things that's coming from everything that we have.
Do any cars surprise you? Are there any cars that come and you go, wow, I really wasn't expecting that to have gone so well, or that it's been a hit that you didn't think might have been such a hit? Yeah, like if I think now, the car that I can't wait to land is the ID.3 GTI. When I saw that, I was like, oh wow. And that to me is that, like, it's a GTI, so the volume it's not going to be 1,000 units a year, but that car is exciting. So that you get that when you see the car, you go, okay, that's going to be a hit. What was a success for us? When we had the e-Golf, we did an executive edition. That was a surprise. 50% mix of the executive edition. We had the UK ring that's gone,
what are you doing there? And I was like, okay, we're just putting leather and alloys on it. And you know, so there's stuff like that where it's worked well, and we thought, oh, it's going to do 20% of the volume, but it just grew and gave the car a big lift.
I always say to people, if you were buying a second-hand EV and you weren't hugely worried about range, buy one of those executive edition Golfs, because they were pretty much hand built in Dresden.
They were
incredibly well built and amazing spec.
Yeah, I had one. I was a big fan of it. I had the one. It was 235 kilometer range. I remember there was free charging at the time, so whenever you did need to charge, it was always blocked.
Yeah,
not too different from now, but it was it was a Golf and with an electric motor, and
what a car! It was great.
Yeah. So that was one of the cars that was probably excited me the most at the time. Look, the Arteon would have been, like, over the years there's always something like, so, well, probably the biggest one to share would be Arteon. When, what year was it? Was it 2019? I think it was. Sorry, no, it would have been 2022, 2023. So we went from selling 200 Arteons a year. Passat had ended. We, for years, had been knocking on the factory door going, we need this car at a better price point. It was too close to the A5, as an example. And we got it. We eventually, due to production freeing up and development costs saving taken out of cars and stuff, we managed to secure a package where the car essentially came down by 8 to 10%. We went from 200 cars to 750 cars the following year. The thing flew.
It still looks like it's been announced today. Like
it's a very fresh looking car.
Whoever designed that car, I don't know what the name is, but fair play to them, because like that's a nice one to have in your back pocket. Oh, I designed that one, yeah. Like people in VW in Germany, in the senior board team or whatever, they've kind of alluded to it, but the Golf will live on, won't it?
From what I gather, yes.
Right.
We did try and get the Up GTI over the line as well, I think, didn't we? Do you remember?
We did, yeah, we did.
If you've never driven it, you've driven an
no,
Up GTI.
Haven't you?
Oh my God.
No.
What a car. Yeah. Absolute little gem. Yeah.
And look, there's some cars where some cars, they're brought in, or we're allowed to bring them in without having like a minimum mix requirement, let's say. So, because again, they're a halo car, there's, like, say for instance, the Rs, we had a T-Roc R on our list price for a while. I think we sold one, but it was a halo model. Yeah. So there's things like that. We would love to bring every model in that the brand offer. You can see some of the cars that we can't, or some of the cars where VRT doesn't work. Say for instance,
the Golf R is probably in that space now, is it?
Yeah, the Golf R is it's a, like, what is it? Pre-tax price is similar to the UK, but yet the UK is selling it for about 45,000 sterling. Over here, it's 75,000 euro. The difference is tax.
But we can't, I suppose, for lots of people who aren't necessarily tuned into how much we pay in tax, it is such a huge factor, especially on those performance cars, isn't it?
I've had comments from people in the UK asking me what I'm smoking when I quote prices, and like, I got into a full-on row with some yesterday who said, you just said there's 24,000 euro extras on that BMW X3. I've just ordered it for 55 grand, and basically accused me of lying. Because look, if you live in the UK and you're just a consumer, you've no reason to know how our tax works, but people can't get their head around it.
Yeah, and like, we all like cars. Like, I think some of the things that frustrates me is, like, say the recent brand trip that I would have been on to Dusseldorf. We had a few events that we had to go to in Dusseldorf over the couple of days that we're there, but we stayed in Dusseldorf and saw the luxury and the super luxury cars, and then you go, I wonder how much that would be in Ireland. And you realise that VRT is 75 to 100,000 to 150,000. The price difference versus the UK, I think that's where, like, it does prevent the market. Like, Ireland has a high wealth status. We have people who can afford to buy Bentleys, Bugattis, Lamborghinis at a UK price, but because of VRT, it doesn't make sense. And it probably makes sense for them to keep the car over in the UK and fly over and drive it around because ultimately they're not going to use the car as a commuter. So I think that's where it kicks us out from the market. I would love to see, like, the tax on luxury and super luxury cars been limited to like maybe 10%.
At least,
like, say maybe cap it at 55,000 or something like that.
It would make the car parks even more interesting. Like, again, the other night in where was I? In Prague. It was a brand new Aston Martin, and everyone was stopped on the street looking at it, because you're just probably not going to see that car here.
Yeah. But you have to wonder, the government are doing it right. They're doing it for emissions levels, but they're also doing it for tax. And how much more would they earn if they did sort of allow a little bit more freedom for the wealthier people to buy these cars and take a sizable chunk of tax, but not an amount that's going to stop people buying it?
See, they still get the VAT. That's the thing. People like. I think we forget. And unfortunately, it's like I would say VRT is perceived as it's a stealth essentially in there. Ultimately, there's a VAT on VRT and it's a sizable chunk on both, and you see it, and we see it in terms of regular pricing. When people compare, going, they start accusing the brands without doing the digging, going, oh, you're ripping off the consumer in Ireland because this. I'm going, well, actually, sorry, if you brought that car in, you paid VRT, the car would be the same price, assuming the exchange rate is set right. So it's like in the world of tariffs, it is a tariff to a point. It's a shame that it's gone that way.
And also that Continental GT has to be serviced. It needs tyres. They're getting multiple chunks of revenue from those cars that they don't have here.
Yeah, and like I think no one drives a Continental GT to commute 200 kilometres a day.
No.
They're driving probably 3,000 to 5,000 kilometres a year at leisure. So, but yet they have to pay the VRT the same as someone that could be driving something that's less emitting but doing it across the mileage. So it's just frustrating because you see the cars and you're like, oh God, that would be beautiful if we had that here. And you just, our roads are, while we have nice cars on the roads in terms of our own cars, our group's cars, there's certainly a lot more that's out there. And and unfortunately, the VRT prevents that from happening until it becomes a vintage car. So.
Yeah. Well, as someone with a 3.6 engine at home that does maybe 1,000 kilometres a year, and it's, what is it, 1809, I feel that pain. But you could be in your 520 diesel, doing 300,000 kilometres, and you're paying 170 quid probably.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating thing. That's where when you love seeing, you just see them come out in the and the UK and on the continent, and you're just like.
And they bring joy. They're genuine, like the car people. It's like going into an art museum. Like we do love looking at them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
As number one EV brand on the Irish market, Volkswagen Passenger Cars leading the way. How have you found over the last couple of years that move to EVs, the challenges, the opportunities?
So we're selling EVs for about 10 years. Like the e-golf days, where it was the battery, but I think the range was 130, went up to 235. So when
24 kilowatt hour battery.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So to go from that to ID.3, we went from taking, I think it was 10 orders a month in e-golf to suddenly going up to 30, 40, 50 in ID.3, and then it exploded with ID.4, and then COVID happened and the demand kind of stayed thereabouts, but then supply restrictions happened. So it was 2023 was a real eye opener because we went from, I think in the previous year we'd done over 30% mix on BEV of all our registrations. It then went down to something like 18, 19%. It's now kind of coming back to that, but we still don't know why. Like you could say, oh, it happened because of the pricing, blah blah. Everything, the demand just suddenly dropped off, and it coincided with. Some VRT or subsidy changes in terms of the SCI grants, but there was something else afield as well. So that was probably the biggest eye opener in terms of that change. But to see it now, we have huge demand on Tiguan and Tayron. We're sold out practically for the year. There's stocks around the country, but we're getting to the point where if you order something from production, it's a 261.
And is that because of PHEV?
PHEV is going very, very well on it, to be honest. No, we still have demand for diesel. There's still people that want a diesel.
Is huge. Still,
but does that then tell you in a brand, in an OEM, that not everyone wants electric?
Yeah, and that's I think and that's why we're not shouting and screaming saying you have to drive this. We have everything for all. So we have ICE, we have PHEV, and we have BEV, and there's people that want a BEV, there's people that want a PHEV or on the Tiguan we see it in an ICE. In Tayron, like 35% of our volume is PHEV. The Tayron PHEV is a 5-seater. So people are opting for they want that size car, but they want it in a PHEV. So we're seeing consumer behaviour change in a way in that, and I think it's just they want to do something. Reality is they'll probably spend 90% of the time driving in the electric motor because of the range in it, but they don't have their own like in terms of their own surety or comfort of, if I have to drive from here to Kerry, will I get a charger, as an example?
It's funny to think that the battery size in those is now the same as the battery size in the e-golf.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and not just because we're in this building, but Volkswagen are probably now offering one of the best PHEV offerings in terms of, like, you will, I know the range of most of those cars is 130, and that will change, but you're very much guaranteed to get 100 kilometres.
Yeah.
And that's pretty low.
Which is kind of nearly you're at this sort of critical point of once you have 100, it's
Yeah.
really very usable.
And I do wonder, will PHEV, because it's weird, like everyone knows what a car is, everyone knows the function of a car, it's been around for a long time, but yet I think EVs are something that people who've never tried it, they genuinely have to try it and maybe even live with it and understand the running costs are so much less. But until you do that, I think that's where the PHEV thing is.
It's safe.
It's going to be a whole-handing exercise, yeah.
Like it's, for me, I'm driving BEVs, I think 5-6 years as my car. A second car at home, a Leaf's car is a Tiguan plug-in. When we drive that, you forget that there's a 1.5 TSI engine in there as well. There is a confidence factor, I think, when it comes to BEVs. But it's great that we have the choice and we can choose between going into ICE and PHEV and BEV. For me, I've driven from I live in Ballygard, so I've driven from just outside of Gorey all the way up to Letterkenny via Ballina in an ID.7. I did it in January, so when temperatures were low, that's what, on one charge. I got up to Radisson and Letterkenny with 3% charged at the Radisson, and then the next day went to Cavan on a visit to a dealer, and then onwards home. But I did that, and I think I can do that now, no problem. I drove to Blackwater Motors in Fermoy and Cork City recently on an ID4 in one charge and back, whereas 4 years ago I would have wanted to stop. I got home with 8% battery. I had AC on. I drive it like a car. I don't drive it any differently. I don't stand behind or drive behind a lorry or anything like that. Just drive it like a car.
It drives me mad into a taxi EV, and a lot of Dublin taxi drivers do this where the aircon is off to save the range, and you can't breathe in the car and the windows are steamed up and it's just incredibly uncomfortable, and it's like, just turn the aircon on, it's fine.
It's funny, what was controversial, I remember at the time when the eGolf executive was coming, was the fact that you were putting 7 bigger wheels on it.
Yes.
And, there was like, really, why are you doing this? And then now you have 21s on a lot of our EVs.
I think at the time it knocked, was it 20 kilometres off the range or something like that, I think it was. But
things have changed.
Things have drastically changed now. So it's
so it's going to be a busy time. As far as I know from memory, there's 9 new Volkswagens coming between now and 2027, I think. So you probably know more, but you can't say. So is it fair to say that the Volkswagen strategy worldwide almost will be, we will have a car for every single customer / option?
Yeah.
So you don't go anywhere else.
Exactly that. And we're like, it's exactly that. We don't want to alienate any customer to say, sorry, we don't have an option for you. And the last probably 24 months or 36 months has taught us that.
Yeah.
We were, when we would have been looking at the current generation Tiguan in terms of the pricing and the volume planning inside of it, it was like looking at it and going, here's the list price of this car. We know we sell predominantly R lines, so it's 50-60k plus, and then we would have been looking at the price of a BEV going, where's the business case for a customer driving an ICE? But the reality is, it still works as a used car. In terms of the Tiguan, there's still the demand there from consumers. So the fact that we can offer something to all means that at least they're not leaving somewhere and being disgruntled, because there's people that their families are driving Volkswagens for years, and then to say, oh well, I can't get that anymore, so I'm going over to
and you probably can't say, but that's what has happened in Ford. If you bought a Fiesta for years, they're now asking to buy a Puma Gen E. That's €12,000 dearer than it's and I've asked about this in the new Nissan Leaf as well. They've 700,000 Leafs. The new one is going to be very nice, and I can't really talk about it till next week. But how do you keep that person in your company if your car models drastically change, or in Ford's case, disappear?
Yeah, and I think this is where retailers come in, to be honest. Like, we can offer the product, we can offer the sales campaign in terms of the sales program for the customer. Their relationship with the retailer is key in that, because the sale, like if someone, usually what's happening is a person's going back to buy off the same retailer or salesperson, and they have a level of trust with them, and they know that person's not going to steer me field. So people are coming in today and they're going, what's this PHEV thing about? What's this BEV thing about? And the salesperson is telling them, well, this XYZ, and they go, okay, you know what, I might give it a try. And they're going, do, or they might say, or well, 90% of them are saying do, I imagine, because looking at our mixes. But that's where that barrier, I think, for us is definitely the retailer network, because you can do and the education piece, even through reviews by you guys, about giving them confidence in terms of the models that we offer. And then it's when people are taking leaps, they want someone to tell them it's okay to take that leap.
Because it's a huge investment. So we get that. Like,
and there is a fear factor when changing from ICE to BEV. There is a fear factor from changing from anything. It's everyday life. There's a lot of certainty in stability. And when you pull out a model, it's like, and we've been lucky. Okay, Passat Saloon disappeared. We've seen a lot of customers transfer into ID.4. We saw them transfer into Arteon, but some also left. So and that's thankfully we have. Look, we're a group brand, so thankfully we have Skoda across the corridor that they, in most of our dealerships, that they could go across and take a Superb if they wanted to stick with that version. But Ford, unfortunately, it's from 15 years. Well, I remember in the Skoda days, you're looking at that brand in the top 3 when we were on the outside of the top 10, going, oh wow, and now it's the opposite way around probably. So.
Not your circus.
Yeah.
Well, Martin, thank you very much for talking to us. Continued success in VW, and we might see you running the place someday. You never know.
Thanks.
Well, I don't know about you, Paddy, but I find it very interesting just to hear what it's like on the other shoe.
Yeah, Martin's really a fund of information. I worked with him for a long time, and he's been in all of those key jobs. So he's seen every aspect of planning, of the intricacies of product, and also now as head of sales in really being in charge of what exactly is going to land in forecourts and being responsible for that. So yeah, really, really good fund of information.
And probably would know where to go for a good night out in Prague.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'd say so. Okay, so look, next week on the show we will have more about the Skoda Elroq RS, which is possibly the sweet spot instead of a sport line. I'll reveal more. We'll also have details on the new Nissan Leaf, which is a car that has sold 700,000 units around the world so far. It's their third generation EV. Not an awful lot of brands can say that just yet. But this has been the Drivers Republic podcast, brought to you in association with Dundeel Motors, where more Irish drivers find their next car from a trusted dealership than anywhere else. Why? Because Dundeel's trusted dealer program means verified dealerships and the kind of backup that matters, like warranties and history checks, giving you confidence from your very first click. Chat to you soon, buddy.
Take care.